Okay. Well, thank you for those really fascinating presentations, and congratulations to the two students, to Anne and Anna Marie, especially because you did that incredibly professionally well. I think I need to see your speech trainer. At first, I'll confess, I struggled to see what the connection was between those three talks, but I got a little prompt there from Alice that it was actually about anthropology. Because when I was listening to yours, Emily, I was thinking actually more about museums as kind of expansion machines, and I was thinking about audience building, and you showed that incredible image of the Great Court in the British Museum, and you said that people are coming to see these spaces, but they're not necessarily coming to see the shows, and the exhibits, and I wondered whether museums have a problem on their hands in terms of trying to, this kind of desperate need for larger audiences, and the sacrifices they may have to make to gain those audiences, shows about celebrity and so on. But I'm not going to turn that into a question because I'm going to have to make this about anthropology. So what I'm interested in about museums is that thing that that question you raised about, in a way, museums belonging to an economy of themselves, that they're talking to each other across national borders, not just to their own populations anymore. They have global audiences, and that in a way their identities are not national anymore, they're multinational. And I'm just wondering, how are we going to see museums tackling that issue? I mean, are they going to kind of, we've already seen them expand into other countries. What do you see on the horizon that will reflect this push outside of their own borders to speak to kind of global audiences?
Gosh, good question. I think the rate of change and development that we see is kind of speaks to the possibilities that could come. Just one example in a museum that I didn't speak about today, the Singapore History Museum, which I think has been renamed to the Singapore National Museum. I first went there in 2002, and the museum had just reopened in a new form of telling the national story. The year after I left, it closed again and was closed for another 5 or 6 years and reopened in 2006 or 2007 in yet another form. And so this constant, I think you mentioned earlier this idea of do museums have a problem? I think they could run into a problem in this need to kind of constantly keep redefining themselves and retelling and recreating stories. Where they're going next, I would like to think about it in the way, in terms of museums actually thinking outside their own walls, although they are, sort of very bounded institutions in a way. I think some of the projects that we see in places like Singapore, where you have these different branch museums, all within Singapore and all touching on different topics, but different institutions. I think museum outposts, especially in countries like Canada or Australia, where you have very sparse populations and a lot of regionalism. And I think a national museum having outposts in different regions of the country that maybe don't have access to the kind of the mothership of the museum in the national capital, whether it's Ottawa or Canberra or Auckland. And I think thinking about museums in different places as existing outside of those walls and that sort of thing, I think is something we could see.
Okay, so kind of dissolving this idea that it's all happening in this building.
In the building.
Yeah. And then tied to that, Anne, this question of, in a way, national logos, these kind of national insignias. I mean, we're seeing that idea dissolve a little bit in the kind of corporate world. That, you know, that's more of a kind of mid-20th century idea of how a corporation operates, and yet, you know, South Sudan feels the need for this symbol, which is almost identical to, you know, 20 other national insignias. Do you see that changing? Like, how are we going to define national identities when, you know, in the 21st century, when, you know, they're all kind of, everything seems to be splitting up, doesn't it? I mean, like, Scotland wants to split away, Ukraine is in the middle of splitting up, Sudan split up. And so they're all, like, desperate for their own national identity, and yet they're using these incredibly kind of blunt tools to define themselves. Are we going to get beyond this?
It's so easy for us to say that sitting here, I think. And there are many audiences for these national symbols. For one, I think your question posits to sort of a global audience. This is boring, this is no longer extant. But there's also sort of a national audience, which really, these symbols fuel a sense of pride and love in them. So absolutely there will be a place for these low-res expressions of designs and sort of validators, I think. And to be honest, like, seeing a document with a seal still gives me confidence, right? Like, I was picked up in the Juba airport with somebody with sort of the UN logo, and that kind of still made me, all right, this is official, not sketchy. So absolutely, low-res, like, absolutely. I don't think they'll go away.
Okay, good. And Anne-Marie, it was fascinating to see that talk about microhomes, because to me it was like watching something about the 1960s and the kind of metabolists come back again. It's an idea that keeps coming back. It never quite seems to take off. And yet housing crises are more extreme in, say, London and New York than they've ever been, and are becoming more ridiculous every year, seemingly. I wonder whether that is a model we want to encourage from developers, in the sense that you were suggesting that they're actually less profitable for them. I was assuming they'd actually be much more profitable because they're making more per square foot. So do we want to give developers that opportunity to exploit land values to that extent? Or should we maybe change zoning or something so that people can portion off bits of their own apartments to rent out and, and generate income, which is actually much more of a favela-style model? Like, if New York could become more of a favela, it'd be, in a way, more 21st century, no?
Well, I think historically speaking, larger apartments are more profitable for developers. So the issue is that they don't want to build them because they aren't going to make as much. My problem, I guess, with that is that there's so many illegal apartments right now. So whether you're having an illegal apartment because it's in an industrial building or someplace that's not zoned for residential inhabitants, or you're using a regular apartment and you're putting up a firewall to make an extra room for another person, how do you enforce these ideas whenever you're going to have making these apartments that we have into a different population living there, basically?
Mm-hmm. Emily, as a professional anthropologist, I mean, I should point out that Anne-Marie and Anne have both done quite a lot of anthropological research in coming up with those very concise presentations. It would be nice to hear a little bit about the anthropology behind the microflat. I'd love to, I mean, or maybe it's ethnography. But maybe you could tell us very briefly about a little bit of ethnographic research you did, and then I'd love to hear from you, Emily, about how you could push that. I mean, as a pro, how can we use anthropology to kind of further some of the research that these guys have been doing? Tell us briefly about what you looked into. How did you research?
Yeah, I mean, small homes are not a new concept, and they date back to very old times. But basically, most of the things that I was able to come across had to do with the American dream, and this idea that people wanted large homes with backyards, a certain number of children, a very nuclear family. And today, that's not the case as often. People are changing, and the American dream is changing, but we have this infrastructure of housing that suits that dream. And so how are we changing our infrastructure, and how are we making options for people who have different expectations in their homes?
That is a great answer. Emily, these guys could probably benefit from some of your wisdom.
Well, I don't know. I'm doing a lot of confessing this afternoon. In my ignorance of sort of design theory and the background of your field, your papers were incredibly refreshing to me. So, oh, this is just like what I do. Because for me, and so to a certain extent, I think you've got it. I'm excited to have found a whole group of people that speak about things the way I like to speak about them, which is, I teach a course on material culture called The Material as Culture, Objects, Meaning, and the Self. And for me, that captures kind of what I study exactly, because for me, what it's about is about human relationships. And so in my view of design is that it's about the object, and it's about the form, and it's about beauty and the relationship of objects to the environment and to each other. Whereas for me, and what I really try to bang into my students, is that the way I think we should be thinking about, whether it's the glasses sitting on the table or the stage that we're sitting on, the building that we're in, is how our environment creates and facilitates these cultural connections, human relationships, all of these entanglements that of humanity that come into contact around what we're interacting with. And that's exactly what you've done. So, for me, when I'm speaking to anthropologists who are very, very concerned about what's going on this level in groups of people, but not actually thinking about the material world that's also interacting. That's actually more where the challenge is. I feel like these two are anthropologists and doing ethnographies of nationhood and of living, and that's exactly what it is. I think
Great.
It's a beautiful job.
Your work is fully endorsed now.
Bonus degree in anthropology.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we're in the interest of keeping this on track, because we are running a little behind. I'm going to draw it to a close there. I also want to say briefly that it's kind of customary for me, especially to kind of bring the audience into these things, but actually this is designed specifically to be a kind of closed shop, to be focused. So that is also kind of interesting, I think, in an age when everything has to be a kind of room-sized conversation. So we're going to go to coffee. Alice, do you want to say anything before we go? We'll be back in 15 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, we've got iced coffee, and the basic idea is that you go find these guys over coffee and ask them what questions you want to. I'm real.
Okay, so coffee and questions out there.